Hi, my name is Jordan. I am a special education teacher from the UK. I share my passion for everything communication, sensory regulation, and fun lesson ideas for my classroom of disabled pupils aged 4 to 11. Each week, I am joined by experts in the field, answering your questions and sharing our knowledge and experience working alongside our beautiful young people. Let's get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sensory Classroom podcast. My name is Jordan, and today I'm joined by Liz Evans from the Untypical OT. Liz is an occupational therapist and solo parent in a neurodiverse family. She supports neurodivergent parents to protect against burnout, to move from survival to peace through a neuroaffirming, trauma and sensory responsive approach. And I'm really excited to speak to her about the all-important topic of parental burnout and the sensory side of parenting today. Hello, Liz.
Hi, Jordan. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. An important topic, this is episode 63 now of my podcast, and we've skirted around this topic, and I don't know why. I've had lots of parents on, and maybe they just don't want to talk about it. Maybe they're not comfortable talking about it. There's a lot of unfortunate shame around this topic, but it is very real. Do you mind, I suppose, so people can understand where you're coming from in this and why we've chosen to talk about this today from your perspective, a little bit about you and your family?
Yeah, absolutely. So, firstly, as you say, parental burnout, very real. And I was in it. Even with the job that I do and the work that I do, I ended up in burnout. And lots of people were kind of talking about, autistic burnout or neurodivergent burnout. I think that probably played a part in my burnout. But actually, the majority of my burnout came from the parenting responsibilities, roles, and the difficulties that we found ourselves in. And where that started was I'm dyslexic. I have an older son who is in mainstream, neurotypical, and I have a son who is on an EASOS package, so educated other than at school. So we weren't able to find a school to meet his needs. He's educated at home, funded through the local authority, and he's diagnosed as autistic. And he had a huge mental health breakdown whilst in school. I was working, I'm a solo parent. It was really, really hard and not knowing kind of what to do. And eventually we had to go through the process of diagnostics, the HCP applications.
Right, so you didn't even have an HCP at that point?
No, nothing.
Right.
No, nothing. And we ended up at tribunal. The county took me all the way to tribunal. Naively, I think I thought, as an OT, my background as an occupational therapist, I've worked in child and adolescent mental health, I've worked in community paediatric teams, I've worked in specialist schools. I thought, I know it's hard, but I reckon I can get through this. Boy, was I wrong.
Really?
And that, I think, was a big wake-up call for me as a therapist, that I knew it was hard, but I didn't realise quite how hard. And even with the knowledge that I had, I was still coming up against the difficulties that other parents were. And I somehow naively thought I could navigate my way through that. Yeah, really, really wrong. And I don't think I'm the only professional. I'm finding more and more now as I'm kind of talking about it as a professional, other professionals going, actually, yeah, I've had exactly the same. Thought I would get through it and I didn't. So I had this mission, Jordan. I had this mission that I felt I had to do something about, was I had to help protect other parents against burnout. Because typical kind of burnout, when people go, oh, just do a bit more self-care, that doesn't work.
Have a bath.
Yeah. Have a bath, go and get a massage.
Right.
Yeah, that doesn't even touch the sides. Go and have a bit more of a sleep. You could send me to Barbados for 2 weeks on my own. It wouldn't even touch the sides. So I knew things had to be different, and I knew that I had to use kind of my OT skills to be able to do that. But actually the kind of very stereotypical, how do we support people in burnout, wasn't going to work for us if we were neurodivergent parents, or if we weren't sure whether we were neurodivergent as parents, or we're neurotypical in neurodivergent families. That typical just take a rest was not gonna cut it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what you're dealing with is so much more than exhaustion, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, can we just explain a little bit about how this burnout is different? I've certainly seen it as a teacher with parents. Usually the children that haven't got a school place, a suitable school place. But also parents that are fighting for diagnosis for EHCP, for the EHCP to then be met, for AAC devices, for the right therapy. It's almost like the relentlessness of the fight. You just feel like you're getting somewhere, and then you've just got a whole other barrier. Is that what makes it different? Is there even
I
more
think
than
the
that?
difference is as well is that, say, so if you look at the diagnostic criteria, it's only workplace burnout is the only burnout that is recognised. So if you look at the WHO definition, which is the World Health Organization, they only refer to workplace burnout, which I think is rubbish. And when I get into my occupational therapy hat on, when I'm looking at occupation is more than just work, it's all the things that we have to do and want to do, is that I don't understand how burnout can just happen in a workplace. Burnout can happen anywhere. And I think there is some research and some stats around burnout is higher in parents with kids with additional needs. And I suspect, and I've got no evidence of this one, but my kind of feeling of that is that we often find ourselves in systems that we can't change. So when you burn out and you get stressed or overwhelmed by something, the natural reaction is to go, well, okay, well, I'm going to step away from that. I'm going to move away from it. Or if it's your job, you might think, well, I'm not going to continue in that job. I'll go get another job. But when you're talking about parenting and you find yourself in systems that you can't step outside of, that's, I think, where you end up with the parental burnout. It is, like you say, it's the consistent stress. It's being overwhelmed and your capacity to deal with chronic stress that just keeps coming at you and you don't get a chance to recover. And there's the sciencey bit behind that, but basically we need to be able to go into a part of our autonomic nervous system to be able to recover from stress. And when you're in high levels of stress, which some of us as parents in neurodivergent families are, and for me, it was at some points I was trying to keep my son alive. It was that serious, and I was coming up against a system that was unfeeling, uncaring, unmovable,
Nameless as
uncontactable.
well. Yeah.
Yet nobody, there was no person. It was just this thing in our lives that I felt was having a huge impact on my family and our well-being, and I couldn't change it. And as a parent, that is terrifying.
Yeah, and I feel like I've seen parents that can take anything for themselves, like they're mistreated, they're not spoken to, they're ignored for themselves. They can almost take that, but it's one more step on. It's the injustice of it all, that it's the most vulnerable in our society that are being time and time again ignored. And you have less time, less energy, less capacity to have this fight, and yet you're the ones that are forced to this position. But it's not even your fight, you're fighting for your children, which makes it even more burnoutable, I suppose, because you just have to keep going for them. I feel like if it was for you, you would have stopped ages ago. You would, like, wrongly, obviously, but you'd have stopped ages ago because you'd have just accepted, that
Yeah.
that can't be done.
Yeah.
But of course you don't, because you're fighting for the voiceless. You're fighting for these people
Absolutely.
that you love so much and are desperate to protect. And of course, that leads to burnout because you're human.
Yeah. It outweighs your capacity to keep going. And I think it was, as part of my burnout was that I got through the stuff that I needed to do. And that's often what happens. You're running on adrenaline and all your stress hormones are kicking in. And I got through the tribunal, all but carried across the finish line by an advocate that I thought I could get through tribunal. I couldn't. I had to get some support in to do it. And it wasn't until we got through tribunal that's when my burnout hit. And boy, did it hit. It came in from the side and literally took me off my feet. And I think a lot of parents, you know, the stress of dealing, because people think I'm talking about when I talk about parental burnout, they think I'm talking about burnout from their children.
Yes.
And I'm not.
I was saying that. Yeah, exactly that. I think that's
Yeah.
exactly what people think about. They're like, oh, you're tired. You're like physically harmed. It's not at all to the children. If the systems were in place to support your family, you'd thrive.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And I'm really try to push that point home is that, yes, our kids stress us out. I've met parents that haven't got neurodivergent kids. Their kids push them to the limits and kids do that to us. But this is kind of a next level and it's being able to more and more I talk to parents, and for me personally as well, it was about trying to keep my kids safe. I needed to keep him safe, and I wasn't being allowed to do that as a parent. And when you think about what's the kind of, I mean, my kids laugh and joke at me because I'll go to them, what's the one thing I've got to do? And they go, keep us safe. But ultimately, that is the bottom line. As a parent, I've got to make sure my kids get to the end of the day. If we get fed and everyone's happy and watered and whatever, that's a bonus. But they are at the end of the day, and I've got them there. Okay, tick, I've done the job that day. And you're coming up against systems that either don't allow you to do that or make it so difficult to do that. And I hear lots of, and as part of being a professional, I've been in those conversations and heard those conversations of that parent. They're a tricky parent. They're a difficult parent. Oh, watch out for that parent. They're a bit of a handful. And mine, I try to talk a lot now with professionals that I supervise and stuff like that. But why? Why do you think they're like that? Where's that come from? And a lot of the time, I'd say 99.9% of the time, anxiety. They're really worried, they're frightened, and they don't know what to do. So they come at it with the only skills they've got available to them. And that might be being really difficult.
Yeah, and also, so sometimes I get students that are year 5, so they're age 10. They've had 10 years of fighting the healthcare system, the education system, county, all of these fights. They're used to that being their baseline. They're used to having to fight.
Yeah.
So finally, when they come to
Yeah.
us, they've still got that fight, that adrenaline still spiked. They're still ready for it to go wrong because everything else has before. And you've got to respect that as an educator. If you're a teacher listening and you've got these fight or fright parents, that is what it is. They are waiting for it to fail because they've only ever known
Yeah.
to be failed
And
before.
they don't feel safe. They know their kids aren't safe and they don't feel safe. And when you're in that part of your brain, in that stress response, you are in protection mode. It's fight, flight, or freeze. And there's others, but fright, flight, and freeze are your main ones. And as you say, if you've got a parent that's been in that stress response for so long, moving out of that takes a long time, a long, long time. And I think there's some difficulty in some of the work that I do with parents is they often don't realise they're burnt out. It's become normal. They're literally functioning. I was functioning. I had 2 kids. I'm a solo parent. I had no choice, but I was burnt out. I couldn't give my kids what they needed. Somebody said to me once, what do you enjoy doing? I just burst into tears on them. So I thought, I don't know anymore. I'm so used to being in this protection mode, doing things that I enjoyed, gone out the window completely.
Yeah, you didn't even know yourself. Is that the long-term effect of being in this mode? And are there other long-term effects that you're noticing either in yourself or in others of this long-term sustained burnout mode?
I think the main one for me was the exhaustion. And I think most parents will kind of go to you, oh, that's just being a parent. You're always tired. But this exhaustion was different. I knew it was different. It was, and the only way I could describe it is it's bone tired. A bit like, when you get flu, like I can't physically move. My bones ache. It's that level of exhaustion on a daily basis that you get up and you go through the process. But if you gave me a bed to lie down on, I would probably that would be me done, and you probably wouldn't get me back out of it. And people used to say to me, "I'll take a rest," but there was always that fear in me that if I took a rest, I wouldn't get back up again. So I just kept going and kept going and kept going and kept going. And so it's things like that. It's things like I found my tolerance to things went down. We probably might touch on some sensory stuff later, but for me, I know I can be tactile defensive. I find being touched quite a lot quite difficult, but I can kind of manage it. But when I was in burnout, whoa, don't come anywhere near me. And I've got one that's a real hugger and he loves the hug. And that was really hard to find a way through. And what do I do? Do I mask my needs as a parent and give him what he needs? Or do we find a way through? And we had to find a way through that meant I could respect my sensory system and what that needed, but also I could make that connection with him and make sure he could still get what he needed. And we still needed that contact, but could we do it in a different way?
I suppose that adds to the cycle as well, doesn't it? Of you're feeling burnout, so can't give him what he needs. So you either mask yourself and get yourself worse, or you ignore is the wrong word, but don't give him the exact needs he wants, and then you feel more shame, and then you get more burnt out, and the cycle continues. And that's probably happening in so many different areas of your life in so many different ways.
And I think as parents, we are notorious at putting our needs bottom of the pile. Everybody else's needs get put first, and if there's some space left over, then we might do
And just
something.
women as well, parents and women, I think, like, the double up of that, and
Yeah,
being
sharing
neurodivergent
role.
as well, I feel like there's 3 layers there of just all really bad at meeting your own needs and putting your needs first.
Yeah, don't meet my needs. Sometimes don't know what my needs are. I'm going to mask them, and my needs aren't as important as everybody else's. And again, I try to be really clear. I'm not saying that parents, we suddenly forget about what our kids need, dump them. It's all about us.
Yeah, it's unrealistic, isn't it? It's never like, that just isn't a like,
But
not
what it
advice.
is doing is often I'll say to parents, but what do you do? What do you do for you? And often I get met with tears or a silence with people desperately thinking, I don't know. Or the other one I will get is trying to explain away why they can't. And I get that because we don't have huge amounts of time. You know, when people used to say to me, "You just need to go and do this," or "You just need to go and do that." I just think, when am I going to do that? I've got a really unwell mental health, but his mental health is really poorly. I've got another one in school. I'm working, cleaning the house, doing dinner. When am I going to do that? But I think once I kind of came out of my burnout and was able to put my OT hat back on, I knew I had to find a way to do something for me each day, even if it was the tiniest thing. And I've got this thing at the moment that I do, and the boys will laugh at me, but I sit with a cup of tea at least once a day on the back doorstep with the door open, even in the rain, even in the cold, just because it gives me a couple of minutes. Do I always get my whole cup of tea drunk? No. But there is an element of protected space. I can still hear the kids in the background. If it's all kicking off, I can go and help. But they know that's my time. And I will say to them, if I can, and it's safe to, just give me 2 minutes. I've got one that will set a timer. Give me 2 minutes. I need this time out somewhere. And I talk about it being a pause rather than a full stop. You can find time for a pause, but we can't always find time for great big long, I'm going to take the whole day off and go to a spa. That's not going to happen.
And do you think that little and often has helped
Absolutely.
you for it to be realistic?
Absolutely. It's little and often finding something to do for me and trying to bring back in, and it sounds a bit cheesy, but bringing in a bit of joy for me. What, because I really did get to that point where I thought, I don't know what I like anymore. I don't know what I do that I enjoy. Some of that I think is probably all parents go through that. There's an element of we take on a parenting role. Our life becomes about taking the kids wherever they want to go, whatever they want to do. And we do lose a sense of who we are. And possibly as well, we get to a certain age where the activities that we did in our 20s are not what we can do in our mid 40s. I decided I was going to go back to netball. My body did not thank me for that.
Maybe a bit ambitious.
Yeah. But I thought, I know what, I'm going to find something for
Also,
me.
how great that that's what you were thinking. Like, it's almost
Yes,
like that you had gone and tried it. Like, that's sometimes just trying something new is the thing, isn't
absolutely. And I mean, people that follow me will know that I've decided to ride a motorbike. I'm 47 years old. I'm arthritic. I struggle with my arthritis. But I thought, I'm going to learn to ride a motorbike. Why not? I'm just going to do that. And there are some days that I get on the motorbike and I just go around and do little loops outside. I'm still learning, so I'm still not that great.
really hard as well. I learned to ride last year, and it's really hard. And I suppose that feeling of also doing something new, doing something difficult, doing something hard. You also, when you're learning something like that, you have to really concentrate. It's very mindful. You have to be in the now.
In the
You
moment.
cannot be thinking about anything else other than your gears, your balance, what's happening on the road, and all of those things. So, and maybe if meditation doesn't work, that's your meditation. You have to be like in your meditation. You have to be active in your mindfulness. But yeah, doing
Absolutely.
something difficult and active, I can imagine, is a great thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, probably motorbiking is probably quite extreme. I'm not saying to everyone going motorbike, you'll have like masses of mums now queuing up for
I
motorbike.
mean, I'm here for it.
I think it'd be great.
Absolutely. Put the kids in the sidecar. I'm here for it.
But like you said, there's also, for me, there's a massive sensory element in biking. So it's
Yeah.
that I've got a partner that bikes, and that's how I first got into it. Is I go pillion with him, And he said he thinks I'm the only person that he knows that gets on as a pillion rider and can go to sleep on the back of the motorbike, which don't worry, everyone, I am safe. He's got like a one that's kind of got
Is it the white noise? Is it the
white
vibration?
noise, the white noise and the vibration. So it's when you're on the motorbike, you just get that sound with all the wind. I think there's no demands of me. I can't pick up a telephone. I can't respond to anything. And sometimes my partner laughs because I get off the other end and I go, I've had about 20 billion different ideas, usually about work, and I'm off about something. He's like, oh God, she's off.
It
But
just
other
gives you that
times
space.
I get that space and that quiet. He's driving. I don't even think about the driving. I literally just sit and, like you say, in the moment, I've got countryside around me or whatever it is around me, and the vibration for me. And I can just feel myself like this. And I think he can tell because my helmet will hit the back of his laugh.
You'll have to get in helmet mic so that he
We
can
were,
think,
yeah.
wow.
Are you still with me?
Yeah, hello, hello. That's Liz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas I
And
think that you say with
I
the
suppose
driving,
if
go on.
parents can't have access to a motorbike, with your OT hat on, what are
Yes.
other sensory things that they can do to regulate and be in their bodies and ground themselves? So that's what we're talking about here, isn't it?
Yeah. So the biggest thing I would say is one is finding something that you enjoy and brings you some form of joy, whatever that is. And the other thing is movement. And that movement can be any kind of movement. And we know that when we get stressed and anxious, our bodies produce chemicals within us to keep us safe, get us ready for flight, freeze responses, all that kind of stuff. But actually, in the days when we would have run, we would have used those chemicals to be able to do those things. When that doesn't happen now, it stays within our body. We get like a truncated response. It stays within us. And then that's what can make us poorly, high levels of cortisol, all that kind of stuff. So we need to move our bodies. And we know from a sensory perspective that is calming and regulating. And it can be anything. Like even I'll say to my parents, you can't get out. If you've got kids that have got, significant needs that you can't leave the house. I'm talking about just walking up and down the stairs 3 times. That kind of thing. If you've got a garden, but it's only a little one, can you walk around the garden and be outside? But how can you move your body today in some way? If that's having a dance with one of the kids, if it's a walk that you've got that you do, even just round the block, a real quick one. And some people will say, and I think I felt like that, is when I was deep in burnout, I couldn't go outside. I didn't want to go outside and movement was really hard. And what I'd say at those points is even just thinking about going to do it can help. So it might be, I don't get too much into the visualization stuff and mapping things. I ground it very much in reality. So if you've got a loop that you do around your house, around the block, could you visualize that loop? That you just start to think about doing it, because starting to think about it will mean you'll get to the point of being able to do it. But actually the tendency and what we tend to want to do is to do nothing when we're burnt out. We just stop. And I get my OT hat on that actually we need to be doing within reason. We need to be able to recover, but we are occupational beings. We are doing beings. And that when we stay still for too long, that can make us even more poorly. So I think movement is a big thing for me, sensory wise.
And I think that's a benefit for the children as well, not only to have a more regulated, co-regulated parent, but also the movement for them, the outside time for them is also important. So don't think of it as, oh, I'm being so selfish, I'm doing this for me, which could often just lead to just build this cycle. Actually, you are doing it for them. Everything you do to make yourself more regulated, more grounded, and more ready,
Yeah,
it's going to make you better for them.
absolutely. And I think what's hard for parents is, for people like you and I, Jordan, that know about our sensory systems, a lot of parents, and I've done some work with this with parents, is they can tell me their kid's sensory system and their kid's sensory profile. They don't know theirs. And so I do some work with parents around starting to recognize your own sensory profile. That because sometimes our sensory profiles clash with our kids.
Yeah, well, like you said with the hugging, it makes so much sense that once you knew that, you could honor their need and your own. Whereas without knowing your own, you're just wondering why it feels so difficult for you to meet their needs without
Yeah.
realizing why.
And I think internally what I would do then with that, before I kind of put 2 and 2 together, which seems ridiculous as an OT, But I think when you're in it, it's really hard to get the perspective, isn't it?
Totally.
So I think when I was in it, I felt very shameful of that reaction. It made me feel like I was a bad parent, that I didn't want my kids near me, that I should be enjoying my time with my kids. I should enjoy a hug with my kids. And I'm an awful person because they're trying to hug me and I want them to be as far away as possible. That's really hard. It wasn't until I had to start working through that and thinking, why am I feeling that? I know why you're feeling that because actually you don't like being hugged by anyone particularly. And when I'm stressed, that's even harder. But that tolerance has gone.
So we talk about being curious, don't we? Being curious about why our children are doing certain things and the importance of curiosity rather than, seeing it as what we believe as like negative behavior or purposeful or attention seeking or anything like that. Let's just be curious. But maybe we're not being curious enough about our own needs. Why are we struggling with certain things? Why are we not enjoying a certain experience? Why are we avoidant of certain things and being curious about our own selves too? What are some ways that if you've got a parent that is exactly as you describe in your support network, or maybe you're a teacher, you're aware of what you're talking about isn't them, but it's definitely someone they know about. How can they be actual help to that person? Is there a way that they could be actual help to that person?
It's really funny because I often, when I'm talking direct to the parents, I talk to them about finding a safe circle and finding a safe circle with people that you feel you can be really open and honest about when you're talking. Those people that don't have those people in your group that go, you just need to. You just need to go and get some more self-care. You just need to go and do whatever it is making sure you've got that safe circle. I think if you're working with people like a parent and you suspect they could be burnt out, is recognizing and I don't mean by going, I think you're burnt out to the parent, but acknowledging to you and yourself and the way that you're working with that parent is thinking, okay, this parent possibly could be burnt out. If they are burnt out, they are going to be struggling to take on information. They are going to be struggling to implement what I'm asking them to do. Because often as professionals, we are saying to parents all the things we need them to go and do on top of all the other things they are doing. And I work in my days when I worked more with the kids, I used to be really mindful of that I wasn't sending parents home with more and more work to do and more demand on them, because actually that's really, really hard. They've got enough to do. And I know some professionals would be like, they just come in and want me to sort their kids out. Of course they do. They are knackered. They are absolutely shattered. And then the thought of another professional saying to them, oh, here's a program to take home. Here's a this to deliver. Here's a this to practice.
Which is
Would
often
be,
the case, right? Let's not fool
yeah,
ourselves. I've
yeah,
had so many meetings where it might as well be targets for the parent rather than
yes,
targets for the child.
yes,
Because it's right, you just need to do symbols, you just need to start an AAC device, but you need to model it at all times, and you just need to start sensory circuits, 4 or 5 times a day, and you just need, and it's this parent goes home with just so many things and targets and unrealistic things to do. Yes, they'd all be wonderful. Of course, they'd be all great. They're not wrong, but is it realistic? Are we just putting that family into burnout even more?
yes. And I think it's, what could you take off that parent? If you want them to do something, is there something else you could take off? Is there a telephone call you could make that they've been trying to make and not getting a response to? Where could you support that parent? What could you do to support them? And then the other thing that I talk about as well with professionals is starting to recognize sensory stuff and doing that by kind of modeling for ourselves. So I often don't get into, telling a parent where they might have sensory needs, but what you might do is start talking about you as a teacher or you as a whatever professional you are, or if you're a friend or whatever it is, talking about your sensory needs. I find it really difficult normalizing language around sensory reactions, that we've all got a sensory profile, every single one of us. And every single one of us is unique in our sensory profile. No one's is the same. And they flex and they move depending on our stress levels or how safe and relaxed we feel. But normalizing language around sensory information and sensory processing and our sensory reactions, our sensory needs. And parents will say to me, oh, so-and-so's got weighted blankets is often a very common one. I steal it all the time. I know. Steal it more. In fact, get yourself one. You don't have to feel bad about using a weighted blanket. If that feels nice, use it more. You found something that works. And things like, often parents go to me, "Oh, I've got like, they call them fidget toys or whatever you want to call them, but they've got something that they've stolen it off one of the kids." That they will kind of say, "Well, yeah, when I'm on meetings and stuff on calls, on Zoom calls, I've got one and I use it." Use it more. Put it in your handbag. Take it with you somewhere. Have it wherever it might be. If you're going to a meeting that's really tricky, take it with you. Help find a way that you can regulate your sensory system. And sometimes that's just playing around with what works for you and what doesn't, if that makes sense.
I put on parents that would make it harder, making them do the phone call, giving them unnecessary targets, even unnecessary meetings. Does it need to be a meeting or can it just be an email? Giving things visually as well, maybe giving them a list written down of all the information rather than saying over the phone and expecting them to retain that information. And that isn't patronizing. This isn't patronizing. This is support
Yeah.
systems.
Yeah.
If you genuinely want to help this family, then this is what can make. And then maybe also just making sure that you have the relationship and embed that kind of relationship where they can say what they need or can say when something is or isn't helpful, because without that, they're just going to stay in that unsafe mode. It's really important to try and build on that relationship and that trust as much as you can. And that starts with you liking and loving and advocating for their child as much as they are. I think if they see that, that is a really easy way of building trust with them, because ultimately that is all they want from the world, is just for their child to be seen and heard and loved. So even if you can't do anything with the parent, just love their child, I would say, is probably the easiest advice I could give, because it just means, I mean, God, I've had parents in tears over burnout for sure, but when they really go is when they just see that we love and see their child,
It's a
because they
relief.
just, yeah, relief. Finally, it's not just me that loves their child. See, it's not just me that doesn't see him as unlikable, unlovable, unteachable, and all those things that they've been maybe not told as clearly as that, but through behaviors of other
Yeah.
people or through attitudes of other people, they've certainly been shown that they think those things. So just to love their child and see and advocate for their child as much as they do is a huge start, and then work off of that in that relationship building. That's certainly the way I go. Is and as a special education teacher, and all teachers are special education teachers these days, I think it is crucial that we prioritize those relationships. It's a really intimate relationship, the teacher parent relationship, when you've got a SEND child, because your child might not be able to communicate between home and school as well as other children can. Even if they have words, they still might not be able to communicate what's happened. They're quite vulnerable in that way, and that can breed a lot of fear. And so, as teachers, if we're really supporting that communication, um, and yeah, building that relationship. We have our kids in our class for 7 years, and we're like family by the time they leave year six. We really are. I love that I know what football teams they support and all their siblings' names and, their dad's names and their grandma I recognize at the gate and all those wonderful things. You just know them so intimately. And even if you've got a child for a year, I think it's really important that we as teachers prioritize that, actually really seeing the family, knowing the family, and not just doing the face, like,
Absolutely. I
yeah.
think it feels often our kids that have got additional needs are quite vulnerable in whatever way it is. Even those kids um, that maybe their behaviours are bigger behaviours, more outward behaviours, that even those kids are vulnerable.
Very.
For us as parents to go, here, have my child. I remember sometimes my kids going to school and everything in me is screaming, don't send them. Keep
Yeah.
hold of them. They're not safe. You keep hold of them. I don't trust what's going to happen when they're out of my sight. And some people would go, "Oh, that's over attachment and all that kind of stuff." No, I think that was just being a mum and being a mum.
But they're not safe, let's be honest. Like, in school, sometimes their needs aren't met. as best they can. Sometimes they're not heard or listened to. Sometimes damaging and harmful systems are used. So actually, as a parent, it's really important you listen to that gut sense, because let's safeguard your children and definitely have that open communication, and definitely be that tricky parent of questioning systems, things. If they don't feel right in your gut, please question them. I'd way rather be questioned and, have a moment to either justify my response or maybe question what I'm doing if a parent isn't sure. So please be that tricky parent for first off. And please give us as much information as you want us to know. Something that I get asked a lot when children are starting school for the first time, whatever age they are, they could be starting a new setting or whatever, what information to give. And I just say, just give me everything. Don't worry about being that parent of like, oh, they do this on a Monday and they don't like this and they do that. Please tell us everything, because it gives us something to work off of. I love the parents that write in the homeschool book every day and are calling, emailing, all those things, or talking to us at the gate, because it gets us to know you and your child, and it definitely makes the job a lot easier. And then maybe as teachers, we could be doing the same for parents, making sure we're communicating what they've done that day, what they found tricky, what isn't going well, and being honest about that rather than hiding it. I feel like goes a long way about building that trust as well. What are we struggling with? Maybe we ask the parent what they do, what have they tried, what do they suggest? You know, Giving them a voice for the first time, advocate for their child and to support us to support them, I think is really important, because ultimately the parent is the expert in their child.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we talk about experts and parents. The parents are the experts.
But often I think they don't feel, well, they might feel it, but it's not acknowledged as that. And I think, I even experienced that going into meetings for my son is I've run meetings, I've run an EHCP, I've done all sorts of stuff as an occupational therapist. But when I went into a meeting as a mum, as my son's mum, I suddenly felt I had no voice. My voice disappeared. And actually in some of those meetings, I had more experience than some of the people running those meetings.
Yeah.
And yet
So
my
what was
voice wasn't.
that? What could be done better to enable your voice? Because if you don't have a voice, then my goodness, what are other parents doing that don't have the degree and the experience and the know-how and know all the acronyms and the words? That some parents really don't know that. They find meetings or just being in school incredibly triggering. What can we do to support that? Because that's the first step, isn't it?
It has to be. It has to be, and it's listening, and it's really listening. It's not just going, "Oh, Mrs. Whatever or Miss Whoever," because I'm a miss, is that, "Do you want to give us some feedback?" And it's kind of like a formality in the meeting. And there's gotta be a space for that parent's voice that people properly listen to and don't just go, "Yeah, we've got mum's opinion, off we go, and we're on to the next bit. Let's get a professional in now to give us their opinion." And we need the professionals in there because as parents, we don't know everything in that sense, but we do know our kids. And I think one, it's being listened to, but two, is finding a way that that parent can communicate in that meeting. I have parents that come to me that say they get into a meeting and then they can't speak. They're so intimidated by being in there, they can't speak. I've got parents that go in that might be dyslexic, like I am, and they struggle to hold the information in their head that they want to get through. And then they come out and go, "Oh, I wish I'd said whatever," and they haven't been able to. There might be parents that are neurodivergent in other ways. They could be autistic or ADHD, and they find meetings particularly difficult. So is there a way, normalizing, if you want to bring in somebody to help you, that's okay. If you want to write things down, that's okay. If you prefer to have it on Zoom call because that's easier, that's okay. If you prefer to do it by email because we can bullet point it, that's okay.
If you
But
prefer to have
finding a way they can do it.
That's okay. And just so you know about EHCP meetings, we have 15 days after the meeting before the thing needs sending off. So if you want the meeting and then think of thoughts, oh, I should have said this, I should have said this, please email, because we can include whatever you want from 15 days from the point of the meeting in that paperwork. I'd way rather you do that than not do it at all. It's so important that your voice is embedded in this paperwork because you are the most important person at that meeting.
And EHCP reviews, the annual reviews, can bring with them a lot of stress as well. A lot of parents have been through a lot getting their EHCP in place. Every year, even for me, when I'm going through my review for the ATOS package, every year I think, are they going to take it away from me? every year. And I'm anxious before I get there. I don't know what the local authority are going to come with, or because the local authority run mine. I think sometimes in schools you don't get much input from the local authority each year for annual
Right.
review. There is being mindful as well in those times that those parents are going to come with maybe not experience of your school or your place of provision, but they've come with experience from elsewhere that they're not always listened to or believed or heard when it comes to those things. And on all of that adds up. And that constant kind of drip, drip stress effect is where we end up down those burnout routes for parents. The capacity is reached and they're out over the top. And then my worry is for people when they burn out is the recovery is so much longer than the prevention, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
If we can get the prevention in there and the protection in there, you're protecting so many other people than just the parent, because there is a definite ripple effect. And that's not placing blame on those parents, but there will be a ripple effect to a parent's burnout.
Yeah. Yeah. And they don't want that. No one wants that. So if you're listening to this and you think it's you, then yeah, definitely reach out to Liz or take on some of that advice and try and think of some things that you can add or take away from your day to make things more manageable. And if you have someone in your life at whatever kind of relationship with you that this kind of you're thinking of that person as we're talking, then maybe see if there's some things that you can take off of their plate too and be that person, because you might be the only person that recognizes that in themselves. Maybe you could be that person that sees them for the first time in a long time.
And it can be really tiny little things. Like I had somebody when I was in burnout turned up at my front door with a meal cooked. And they didn't stay, didn't ask anything of me. They just went, I was making it, I had some left over. They didn't. They made it for me. I know they did, but that's not what they told me. Thought you might like it and handed that to me. My kids were never going to eat it because they're the pickiest eaters in the world. But it meant I didn't have to cook yet another meal that night. And it took a bit of load off me in that moment. And that made such a difference to me. Just something little like that.
Yeah, and it's not even about the meal, is it? It's about that person and taking the time to see you and do something.
Yeah, you were in somebody else's thoughts. Somebody else was, and let's face it, we want to be thought about. We want to be held in mind. No one wants to be forgotten. And actually, little things like that show that somebody's kept you in mind. And
Yeah,
that means a lot.
definitely. Such an important conversation. If people are listening to this, what would you want them to take from this conversation?
I think the biggest thing is that it sounds a bit cliche, but burnout isn't the end of the story. I think I was very frightened of burnout, and I know that I still flirt around the edges of burnout. We're not immune to it. Things are going to happen in our lives, and if you do burn out or you feel you're burning out, it is not because you are less of a parent, you have failed in some way. It means that the demands on you have outweighed your capacity. It's not that you can't do it, you don't have the skills to do it. It means that actually the environment, the situation that you found yourself in has exceeded your capacity. And that is not a failure. That's something else going on and that's not the end of the story. There are things you can put in place, there's protections you can put in place. And yeah, don't give up. It's not the end of the story, the burnout.
Absolutely. If people want to find out more about you and how you support, where can they find you?
So I've got my website. You can find me on that, which is the Untypical OT. If you put that into Google, it will pop up. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And the other thing I suppose to pop in there is that a lot of parents don't always think, oh, an OT could help me.
Right.
People think occupational therapy, that's for my kids. Occupational therapy, they do the swing stuff. So I have got on my Facebook, on my website, there's a PDF about what is OT anyway. And it just talks through what an OT is. And actually, we don't just work with kids, we work with all across the lifespan. And parents often think I work with them to help their kids. By looking after us, I do help their kids, they do help their kids, but I work with parents to support them and their mental health and their well-being. And you can find me on all of those social media platforms.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Liz. Such an important conversation. I know this is going to be one that I share with many parents that I get in my DMs. So thank you so much for being here. And I'll leave all the information that you've shared in the description down below. So if you need clickable links, it'll be all down there. Thank you, Liz.
Thanks for having me.